And Jennifer, I don't know what happened, but it felt like I couldn't move. Like, it was like my elbows froze. And I knew that I had a stress hormone dump into my system.
I even tell my teacher, I'm just like, I sit down, I look at a piece of music, I have no idea how I'm going to play it, and I just start playing it. And there's something that happens there where you just have to like stop thinking and you let a different part of your brain sort of take over that
Yeah.
sense of euphoria, that sense of just like, ah, I did it. It's
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So instead of being in a negative feedback loop where you're pouring yourself into whatever activity it is and it's draining you and you get into this negative feedback loop, when you're working in flow,
yeah,
whatever it is that you're doing, it's so rewarding
yeah,
that your own experience refuels you and you
yeah.
get into a positive feedback loop. That night when I was sitting on the couch, right, figuring out after that horrible concert, I literally was grilling myself with questions. And the first question was like, okay, where am I when I get into the flow state the most? It's on stage. Where are you when you lose all sense of time and you just love what you're doing?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Happy Productive Podcast. I am so excited to be talking to our guest today, Miss Diane Allen. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
We're so happy to have you here. And what you guys don't know is that Diane is an international speaker, but she's also a violinist. And many of you maybe don't know that I also play the violin. Not well, but I do play it and started to learn as an adult. And so I cannot wait to jump into this conversation today with Diane. And one of the things that she really focuses on, so she's the author of Flow, Unlock Your Genius, Love What You Do. And I know that you bring the whole violin thing into this. And so I'm just so excited to have a conversation with you today.
I am too. My idea of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Diane, tell us a little bit just about you, your background. Like, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, that's a loaded question.
I know.
Why don't we just jump straight to here? I'm holding up a picture of the orchestra that I used to play in. And here I am. I'm the lead violinist, second in command to the conductor. And so if you imagine this picture, like somebody crawled up onto the ceiling of the stage and they're taking a shot of the orchestra from the top down. That's what you see. You see all of our heads. You see all the silhouettes of our instruments. Anyways, in this position, there's a lot of things that was going on. Number one, I'm second in command to the conductors, right? However poorly or well I performed would have a ripple effect throughout the orchestra, right?
Yeah.
So I always had to be at the top of my game. That's the first thing. Second thing is I had to lead without talking. How do you do that? We're playing music, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing. And then, something that's much more direct to how did we get to what I'm doing today. And I don't play in the orchestra anymore. I actually do corporate speaking and I do perform when I speak. How did I get to there, right?
Yeah.
So as one of the many jobs that I had for the orchestra, there's a lot of different things that I had to do. One of which was I had to take a small group of musicians to do cultural outreach concerts.
Mhm.
And, I'm talking like I've had the whole New York City violin training. I've had hundreds, actually over 1,000 concerts under my belt. My husband and I stopped counting after we hit 1,000. He's also a musician. And, rock solid performances under my belt, turning on that light switch, getting into the music, which is a musician's version of getting into their flow state, right? Getting into the music, getting into the flow state became routine. So I'm at one of these concerts, these cultural outreach concerts, rural community. Okay. We're talking Saturday afternoon, 2:00. Maybe there's 50 people there, jeans and t-shirts, super casual. And I'm running the show. And I have this wild idea. I thought, wow, I love public speaking. I love playing the violin. Why don't I combine the two? So without any preparation, all I do is I walk out and I start giving the pre-concert lecture, having a great time. As soon as I finish, I turn around, sit down, and give a big cue for the music to start. And Jennifer, I don't know what happened, but it felt like I couldn't move. Like, it was like my elbows froze. And I knew that I had a stress hormone dump into my system. That is what I knew. I didn't know why it happened at that time. I also knew that once you have a stress hormone dump into your system like that, there's only one way to deal with it, and that is to let it run its course. Yeah. You can't continue to be stressed out, because then you'll just continue to perpetuate the stress hormone dump. So I'm like, oh my gosh, here I am. I can barely move. My friends are looking over the music stand, like wide-eyed at me. Like, where's her? Where we can't hear her melody, right? They're playing the harmony. And that means neither can the audience hear me playing the melody. So I'm like, should I theoretically, I should be freaking out. But I knew, no, neutral mind, I will beat myself up later.
Yeah.
Stay neutral. And I had this mantra, just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. And it felt like an hour, but it really only took about a minute for me to regain the full use of my arms, right?
Yeah.
But then there was this disconnect. I wasn't putting any feeling into the music, and it freaked me out, because now, for the first time, something that I'd taken for granted, getting into the music, my reputation and job security will now be at stake if I have a problem with this.
Yeah.
So that night is like, one of those defining moments that I had in my life, where I literally sat down and I reverse engineered, how do I get into the flow state? And that turned into a TEDx talk. It turned into my book, Flow, Unlock Your Genius, Love What You Do. It turned into my platform as a speaker. And it's what catapulted me to what I do now, which is combining the two loves, the speaking and the violin, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a linear path, I'll tell you that. But it was a path that I followed. And it, when I was getting to that place where I played in an orchestra, that was a very linear path, right?
Yeah.
I love the violin. I'm going to study. I did all the practicing, all the hard work. I did all the auditions, right? Very linear. But once I got to this place, was like, what? How is it that I can't get into the music? And I started reverse engineering it. It just took me in a whole new direction, and I followed the breadcrumbs, and here I am today.
Oh, such a beautiful story. Let's talk a little bit. Let's dive into that flow state, because I would really love to understand this a little bit more too, because I started playing the violin, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago as an adult. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't practice like I'm supposed to. I don't. I'm a very busy person, and I tell my teacher, I'm like, I'm here, I'm committed, I show up, but I don't practice. And I know that when I do have more time and I practice more, I'm going to get a lot better. But one of the things that I have noticed with the violin, and I didn't realize it was one of the hardest instruments to learn, when I'm just like, I want to play something, but I don't know what, and I just sort of pick the violin. But like, when I start overthinking it, everything goes to crap. And I even tell my teacher, I'm just like, I sit down, I look at a piece of music, I have no idea how I'm going to play it, and I just start playing it. And there's something that happens there where you just have to like stop thinking, and you let a different part of your brain sort of take over. And I don't know if like, is this part of our flow state that we're talking about, where you just kind of surrender to it. And then like, I don't even know sometimes how I'm playing. It's happening in the brain and the hands and all of that. But when I start to think about it and break it down and really get analytical, like I just literally, I can't put 2 and 2 together. And so talk to me a little bit about, what is the flow? Help our listeners and me understand this better.
So if we take your experience, okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Okay. And we'll see to what degree you were in flow. Okay. So when you have those moments when it does feel like, you've put your thoughts aside, it's coming from a different place, right? Do you lose a sense of time? And how would you know that? Well, maybe the time feels like it goes by really quickly, or maybe it goes by slowly, but in a good way.
Yeah, I definitely lose a sense of time. And when you're really in it, it doesn't feel rushed. It just feels like beautiful, and we're playing, and then it starts to actually sound like music, and it sounds good to my ears instead of like, oh God.
Yeah. So that sense of time, losing a
Yeah.
sense of time, is one of the key indicators of being in flow.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you another question. They say, another key indicator is losing sense of self, which is a very weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are things that get turned on in your brain, and there are
Hmm.
things that get turned off in your brain when
Hmm.
you're in flow.
Hmm.
Okay. So, and this is what contributes to losing a sense of self. So I'm just going to kind of go into the background a little bit
Yeah.
because it'll explain it. So when the things that get turned on are a cocktail of peak performance hormones. They're an endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And because of that, we experience euphoria, we experience motivation, we experience peak performance, and we experience happiness.
Yeah.
We also can get more done in 30 minutes than we had in the last 3 days, which is why flow state and happy productive podcast is like we're going to go into why this is like the perfect match for us to be
Yeah.
talking. So those are the things that get turned on. Now, here are the things that can turn off in your brain. When
Okay.
you are in flow, your fight or flight response and your inner critic are shut down,
Yeah.
which means people feel fearless and uninhibited. So that sense of self is literally, the more you're in flow, the quieter the inner critic.
Yeah.
So when you are in that state, does it feel like you lose a sense of self and the inner critic is just shut down?
It does. And it's so interesting that you're saying this because I've gotten way better at it, but I will often have to just say to myself, so first of all, just be brave and put yourself out there and know it's not going to be perfect. Like this was a big part of playing because when you're in business, like at a high level and people are coming to you and it's just like, you need to have those answers and I do and blah, blah, blah. Then you go to play the violin and talk about an ego check of just like, I'm really not good at this. And
Yeah,
so having to set that aside, tap into just like some courage of just like, I'm just going to be brave. I'm just going to put myself out there. It's okay. And let me just push through this. Like the violin has helped me to do that so much of just set the inner critic aside and be willing to just jump in and play. And
yeah,
then if I mess up, you can tell when the brain starts to get involved and then it's just a disaster after
yeah,
that. But if I can shut that off and just be like, it's okay, just push through and keep
yeah,
going, that
yeah,
sense of euphoria, that sense of just like, ah, I did it,
yeah,
it's there. And
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So we have talked about losing sense of time, losing
Yeah.
sense of self. So for those of you who are listening, I want you to see if you can remember a time when you've lost sense of time, lost
Yeah.
sense of self. Ideas and insights come in from out of the blue. That's
Yeah.
another that's another key indicator that you're in flow. And so a lot of times people experience that maybe out on a walk or in the shower or driving, right? And in those circumstances, that's literally like not not exactly flow state, but similar things happen in your brain. Like
Hmm.
when you have shower moments and ideas come in, the prefrontal cortex is temporarily shut down.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's what turns off your inner critic. So I want you just to start noticing, where do you experience these key indicators? Things coming together with this sense of ease. You've described that, like your inner critic is checked out, and you have like an ease with playing the violin, right?
Yeah.
And that's also what I explained before, which is like that those times when you get more done in 30 minutes than you had in the last 3 days, right? That's when things come together with that sense of ease. That is being in flow. Another key indicator is, instead of being in a negative feedback loop where you're pouring yourself into whatever activity it is and it's draining you and you get into this negative feedback loop, when you're working in flow,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're doing, it's so rewarding
Yeah.
that your own experience refuels you and you
Yeah.
get into a positive feedback loop. Do you experience that too?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I
So
I
Jennifer,
I really
yeah,
do. And even just like the setting aside the inner critic, the playing music, and there's just something about music that when it just sounds beautiful and it just sort of carries you away. And I do get that at work when I'm working with clients and things like that, but not as much outside of work. So It's
Okay.
it's almost like in the violin, there's a different part of my brain that engages,
Yeah.
and it's not that analytical,
Right.
add up the numbers, the math. There's a different part of the brain that just
Yep.
seems to engage, and when you can get into that space, it's just beautiful.
Yep. That's because the prefrontal cortex is shut down. That's where a lot
Yeah,
of that analytical stuff happens. And the
yeah,
neocortex is amped up, which dramatically increases learning speed.
yeah,
So the last key indicator is experiencing more meaning, joy, and fulfillment,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So organizational psychologist Adam Grant, he gave a TED talk and he wrote a New York Times article on this very topic. And he talked about the mental health spectrum and how
Oh,
halfway between depression and flourishing, there's this midway point where you're fine, but you're not fine. You're functional, but you can't get motivated. You're just kind of blah.
yeah.
And the antidote, he specifically says this in, I think it's like even in bold writing in the New York Times article. The antidote to getting into from languishing to flourishing is to get into your flow state.
Mm.
So what we just did was we talked about the key indicators of being in flow. We also talked a little bit about the neuroscience of
Yeah,
being in flow
yeah,
and the benefits of being in flow. We talked about happiness. We talked about getting more done, right? Productive ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue.
yeah,
95% of thoughts are repeating. When you're in
yeah,
flow, you have new thoughts.
yeah.
So I could see how this is happening for you at work and it's happening for you at with the violin. And it feels
Mhm.
very different, right?
Yeah,
So does that help to like so
it does.
the thing is that most people don't realize flow actually let me backtrack. Flow is not a mindset.
Mhm.
It's a
Okay.
mind state,
Oh,
okay?
interesting.
Because it is under positive psychology. It is positive psychology is all about what's working well in your life, reverse engineering it so you can create more of that goodness in your life. And
Yeah,
the neuroscience is all, proof that there is a very specific thing that those peak performance hormones that get released in our brain, what parts of the brain get lit up, what parts of the brain get turned down. So it is a real thing.
yeah.
And oftentimes we experience it like we are so in flow, we don't realize it. And it's
Mhm.
not until you're out of flow that you
Mm.
realize that you were in flow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's not until you're out of flow that you realize the benefits
yeah,
of being in flow. This might sound a little extreme, but I'm going to go for it. So there's a really cute little bookstore downtown where I live here in Bend, Oregon. And I had an author event since my book has recently launched.
yeah.
And there was a lot of my friends and, colleagues were there. And then there were some people that I didn't know.
Mhm.
And I'm explaining what flow state is
Yeah,
because a lot of people say, I didn't know there was a name for that. When you lose all sense of time because you love what you're
yeah,
doing. And, it could be Friday night, with a friend of yours that loves making homemade pizza, right? And they're so
yeah,
enthusiastic about it. And they spend all Friday, they just talk about it all week. They can't wait for it, right? There's just something that's so fulfilling about it. We'll get back to that story in a second, but that when you go through and you ask did you lose sense of time, did you lose sense of self, go through all of those things, they're probably like yep, right? They were getting into their flow state.
yeah.
So as I'm explaining this woman has a revelation. I would say she was probably in her mid 70s, maybe even 80s. She
Yeah.
was elderly, and she said, I had a job that I loved for years. And it was in the caregiving business, which is interesting because that's a high burnout business right now.
Mhm.
But she said, I had to wake up at 5 every morning. I would work a long day. I would get in bed by 8. I loved it. The day felt like it went by in no time at all. And towards the end of my career, they put me in a different position.
Mm.
And I hated it.
Oh,
I couldn't figure out what happened. The magic that of my career for so many years, it was gone. And I retired early because of it. And my thinking was she was so like she was visibly upset.
yeah,
And I think she had a revelation. I think what the revelation was is that this could have been preventable.
yeah,
Okay. on two sides,
Yeah.
because I go and I train a lot of people. I'm speaking to leaders, I'm speaking to HR professionals,
Yeah.
and I'm teaching them how to get into their flow state on demand, number
Mm-hmm.
one, and I'm giving them the steps so that they can coach the people that they serve to do the same,
Oh, so
to make
nice.
sure that your people are loving their work.
Yeah.
How can you do that? Well, it's the steps that we're going to go through in just a minute here.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, if she had known that it was the flow state, and if she knew her own unique way of getting into flow, she could have been able to do the best she could in the new position to get
Mm-hmm.
back into her flow state if she
Yeah.
could have defined what that is for herself.
Yeah. So cool. I mean, really, really powerful. I love this so much. All right, so you already did the lead in, and that's exactly where I want to go. So, everybody who's listening right now, I know is like, hey, okay, so how can I intentionally get into my flow state, especially if I'm not feeling the flow right now? Like, what are some things, Diane, that people can do to actually intentionally get into their flow state?
Yeah. There's two different models we could talk about. Let me start with the one about how you uniquely get into flow,
Okay.
because I think it kind of fits with the storyline that we have going on so far here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It sounds like, Jennifer, that where you get into the flow state occurs in a lot of different places,
It
right?
really does. When I'm out at the barn with my horse, I lose all sense of everything. I'm just in joy. I just love it. When I'm playing the violin and I can set that critic aside and just really get into the music. In my work, my day-to-day work, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And then there are times of course where it is harder to get into that flow state. And so yeah, if it's not something that just comes easy, comes natural for us, like what can people do to
Yeah.
really intentionally get into that?
Yeah. So we're going to go through three prompts.
Ooh,
And so they are where, what, and why.
okay.
And the first thing is, and I'll give some examples. So, that night when I was sitting on the couch, right, figuring out, after that horrible concert, I literally was grilling myself with questions. And the first question was like, okay, where am I when I get into the flow state the most? It's on stage.
Okay.
What am I doing? I'm playing the violin, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm doing on the outside. But the real question is, what are you doing on the inside?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, well, my friends would say, well, yeah, we create the music. That's what we do. People wouldn't hear it if we don't create it. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
that might be still what we're doing on the outside. And when I think about it, okay, it feels like I'm sharing the message,
Mm.
and it feels like I'm sharing the experience as well. And then I thought, you know what? I I feel like that when I read out loud to my son. I'm
Mm.
sharing the message, I'm sharing the experience. It feels the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm doing on the inside. And the more I get into telling the story, through the music, the more I get into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then why is that so meaningful? That's the third question. Why? Why? And when I'm talking about why, because we ask this question so many times, what's your why? What's your why? I'm talking about the values that are so beyond us
Mm-hmm.
that we strive towards them. They pull stuff out of us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, share the message, share the experience. Why is that so why is that so meaningful? Well, music unites us, and unity, like, that's what touches me to the core. Like, anytime we had an audience sing along, you've got the choir behind the orchestra, you've got the
Mm-hmm.
house lights up, you've got thousands of people combined together through one activity.
Yeah.
I'm up there crying in a
Mm-hmm.
concert. Same thing, Walk for Alzheimer's. You got thousands of people,
Yeah.
coming together for a cause, and I'm sobbing, right? I can't help myself. So what you do, what I do on the inside was, sharing the message, sharing the
Mm-hmm.
experience. Why is that sense of unity? And when you
Mm.
can define this for yourself, you have a strategy, what I call flow strategy. My flow strategy is sharing is how I shift into the flow state on purpose, and unity is how I can shift into it with purpose.
Mm.
So the chief operating officer of a medical center, she was
Yep.
having communication issues with her people. She's an introvert. She does not want to try to do something that's outside of herself because she will burn out. She knows that.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I really need to be authentic here. And I don't know, they interrupt during meetings. The specific issue is they interrupt during meetings and they point a finger at me for lack of leadership.
Mm.
So we went through this process. Where are you when you get into the flow state the most? In my office. What are you doing? Having a one-on-one conversation with people.
Mm.
Okay, now what are you doing on the inside?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I'm putting aside my thoughts and I'm deeply listening. Why? Why is deep listening so meaningful for you? Well, because the deeper I listen, the deeper I connect. And connection is what touches me to the core.
Yeah.
So she knew exactly what to do. She went to their next team meeting and she just opened by stating the main objective. And she told everybody that she wanted to take the time to listen to each person's point of view. She set herself up.
Mm-hmm.
And as she tapped into her deep listening superpowers, so did everyone else, like not a single interruption. And as soon as the last person finished speaking, the room burst into this spontaneous conversation where they solved all kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And by setting herself up to get into her flow state, not only did it inspire the other people to get into theirs, but it sparked group flow, which is that team synergy that everybody craves for. And what this takes us back to, I know many of you are leaders, is now if we go back to me in the orchestra, I'm leading without talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this chief operating officer experienced the exact same thing that I experienced leading an orchestra. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same thing that that person who loves making pizza on Friday nights is doing. You're getting into something by getting into, right, your flow state, by using what you uniquely do on the inside. And you get into that sense of purpose, okay? Yeah. You are igniting the 40,000 neurons in your heart. Okay. The electromagnetic field of the heart reaches out 3 feet around us. Yeah. Everybody in that 3-foot circumference is going to feel our energy. They're going to then sync up. Now they're exuding their 3-foot circle, right? This is how you ignite group flow. Yeah. So you have to lead yourself first by using your flow strategy to get into flow, in order to lead all of those around you and to get that ripple effect going. So flow is, I have a whole chapter on leadership in my book. Flow is the energy of influence.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. Like, I love this so much. You know, one of the things on having you on the show today, it's like, okay, how can a concert violinist, you know, help people in the corporate space, the executive space? Like, how in the world? But you have answered that question 100%. And you're so right when now you start to bring it into a group situation. Even in the violin, I now play, I was only with my teacher, but now we play in a small group of 4 or 5 other musicians. And it really just enhances the whole experience when everybody now is coming together and playing. And it's just like it's like that flow state, but like elevated when now you bring other people into it. And now everybody else is also in flow. And it's really no different than being a leader in our company and getting ourselves into that flow state first, and then being able to now help and lead our team in getting into their flow states as well.
Yes. It's interesting because I have a speaking engagement coming up. And part of the process is I talk with the leaders and I ask them, what's going on with your people, right? How can I tailor the message to them? And this is an organization where they specifically told me that their leaders experience loneliness. And I was like, yes, I do get that, because being in music is a very social event. And just because I had a leadership role, people would not socialize with me as much. Like the other leaders, we would talk to each other. And it's not like, it's not like I wanted that. I wanted to be able to just like freely talk with everybody, right?
Right.
And I get that, people kind of have their own ideas of, well, I shouldn't be, socializing with the leader. Well, I don't know, whatever they're thinking, right? But I think that the nonverbal connection that I created,
Hmm.
the conductor and I would really sync up together and exude our energy as much as we could.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's a deeper level of connection. And I just would have to remind myself that, okay, we're not socializing, but we actually are, right?
Yeah.
We actually
Yeah.
are in this together. And I'm able to create that and, be part of that enthusiasm chain, right? Reaction
Yeah.
that happens, the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
And so, are we really lonely? No, but kind of, I'm just trying to figure out a way to put it into perspective for them, because I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it is lonely, but when and that's why it's great to listen to podcasts like this. It's great to
Yeah.
be in groups where you're with other leaders and you're able to
Yeah.
talk about these things, so you have that camaraderie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
agree completely. So important. I have a client right now going through this that she's the executive and she was just promoted to a managerial role on the team. And she was just like, Jennifer, I do feel alone because it's like things are different now. Like she's not on the same playing field. She is the manager. Now she's having to enforce things. And there was a whole lot of stuff going on in their office. And so she has now become that leader, that manager. And she's like, they seem to treat me different. And so it's not her imagination, it's a very real thing. But I love that there are things that we can still do to bring ourselves together, bring our teams together. And we see this too, even at our retreats when we take, 30 entrepreneurs and we're all in the same room. And I hear this all the time of the entrepreneurial isolation, the loneliness. It's a very, very real
Yeah.
thing. But when you can come together with other business owners and we see that, hey, we're all the same, we're all going through the same stuff, like it creates such a beautiful sense of community and fulfillment, and that loneliness thing kind of starts to go away, when you're
Yeah.
feeling really surrounded by other people and you're all together. I mean, even some of like our masterminds, when we do this and just that conversation and that dynamic and everybody's so connected, it's a beautiful thing.
You know, when managers understand their own unique flow strategy
Yeah.
and they know those three steps, where, what, and why,
Yeah.
then oftentimes they're the ones who are working directly with the frontline people.
Yeah.
And when they have that tool in their pocket, and if somebody is having an off day,
Yeah.
you can take that person aside and say, let's talk about this. Tell me, what do you like?
Yeah.
Use, and I like to use all of the language. I talk about this in my book. Like, how can because I just gave, you all have had some flow education, right? If you're
Yeah.
talking to somebody, this woman, she told me, she said, I work for this enormous plumbing company. And she said, I think that our people totally understand getting into your work like a musician gets into the music.
Yeah.
So that's an easier entry point than saying, get into your flow state, right?
Right.
So instead of saying, where are you when you get into the flow state the most, you're going to
Hmm.
say, where are you when you lose all sense of time and you just love what you're
Yeah.
doing? Where are
Yeah.
you when ideas and insights come in from out of the blue? You use the key
Yeah.
indicators. Where are you when, and then you insert key indicator there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing? Well, you're doing this, but what are you doing on the inside? And you coach them through it, and then you ask them why it's so meaningful.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes you're able to have that, create that ripple effect throughout your organization.
Yeah. Oh, I
If
love
you,
it so much.
yeah,
Diane, I could just sit here all day and talk flow state with you. Like it's so beautiful. I know, and we need it so much these days. I know people right now are wondering, like, where can they go to find out more about you? Where can they buy the book? Where can they find out more about you? Or if they want to bring you in as a speaker, please tell everybody where they can find you.
yeah. Well, you know, if you want to be more happy and productive, that's what we're here to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I have the cliff notes of a lot of things that we talked about today. And this is my gift for you. There's also a couple of videos, and it's just we'll have the link down below, but it's tinyurl.com/flow state gift. There's
Nice.
also a flow strategy worksheet
Oh,
in
beautiful.
there,
Yeah.
as well as next steps. My book also has the worksheet in it. It has exercises. It has all the background and more examples. It has that chapter on leadership I mentioned, as well as a lot of different stories of different people and how they use their flow strategies and things like that. So that's on Amazon. It's easy to just find, if you just say Diane Allen flow, it comes right up. And that's what I have for people. And I'm just super happy to share it. And the tinyurl.com is also a way to, for us to connect. So
I love it so much. And everybody, we will absolutely put all of Diane's links and information in the show notes. So absolutely, please go grab a copy of her book. Please check out some of the freebies. Diane, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. You have inspired me to keep going with my violin. Not that I'm going to stop, but it's inspiring to talk with somebody else. And honestly, I didn't even realize some of the benefits that come from playing a musical instrument, and especially the violin. So you've helped me today to just really understand a little bit more about myself and my playing. So I really appreciate that.
That's exactly what I hope for you and for anybody who's listening to this. That's awesome.
Nice. I love it. All right, you guys, that's it for today's episode. Definitely make sure that you take an action from today's show. It's one thing to sit and listen and be inspired and be motivated, but jump in there, see what you can do to improve your flow state. Go grab Diane's book, take some action, and that's where you're really and truly going to get the result. So that's it. Thank you guys for being here with me today. Get out there and have a happy, productive day, y'all. Bye.